The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode number 33.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Don Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. Today we're discussing the new Star Trek Discovery episode, New Eden. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Before we begin, as always, remember, folks, to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, leave us comments, subscribe if you have not yet subscribed. Why have you not subscribed? Or why are you listening to this way? Subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on YouTube, where you can hit the bell to get notifications. You can listen on your connected little lady in a can device from Amazon or Google or Apple by saying, play Secrets of Star Trek podcast. That works. That'll play the most recent episode. That'll work for any of our podcasts.
I like how you avoided the wake words there.
Yes. Although if your wake word is computer, as it should be, as a Star Trek fan, I've just woken up your
I tried that for a while, but it kept activating too often. Exactly. I'm waiting. They need to implement user chosen, just open it up. And as soon as they do, I'm going to use Fjodz as mine, because that's never going to get triggered. But it's a reference to the use of that word in Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle's Mode in God's Eye series.
That's what I thought. It sounded familiar.
Yeah.
What was there's the one with the guy who goes, he does the pop, with his mouth. What was that from? Oh, that just triggered a memory of that. But
the Gods Must Be Crazy.
Well, no, that's another one where you could use some of the names from the Gods Must Be Crazy. Maybe hopefully they use like Bushman. They allow you to use Bushman talk to do it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I do want, before we get started talking about this episode, which you really want us to talk about this episode, is I want to tell you about the new Secrets of Star Trek store on sqpn.com/Star Trek. If you go to that link and you click on the store link, you will see all of the different seasons of Star Trek there, all the movies, links to Blu-rays and to the streaming videos and everything. We put it all in one place. As well as some books, the books that we were giving to our patrons at patreon.com. They're the first 50 years books that we had, the 50-year mission, it's called. And the two volumes and the autobiography of James T. Kirk, that's linked there. What we're doing is we're putting together the store to get these resources available to you if you want to go out and get it for yourself. You want to go watch this, if you don't want to watch it on Netflix, say, or Amazon, because they keep taking them off and have the behind the scenes material. This would be a good place to go and click the link, because when you purchase, after clicking through on those links, you help us continue to do what we do, because Amazon gives us a percentage of the sale. So we greatly appreciate it.
Even if you just go there and you don't buy one of those, but you buy something else on Amazon, it'll help us. Exactly.
So if you can do that, especially, before you go shopping for something, if you need to buy a crate of toilet paper, for instance, from Amazon, and have it freighted to your door, we would greatly appreciate it if you would do it after clicking one of those links and really drive the data mining people crazy, trying to figure out why. So that said, let's get to the reason we're all here, which is to talk about this new episode called New Eden. And after last week, I don't think we need to hear the song from the original series again.
Was, for people who don't know what we're talking about, there was an episode of the original series called The Way to Eden, and it featured space hippies.
Oh, yeah.
And the Space Hippies one of them had a song called Heading Out to Eden, and it was painful.
Yes, even in the 60s, it was painful. So that's not this. What we have is this episode, which was directed, by the way, by Jonathan Frakes, the bearded one.
Yeah.
He was number one, Riker from Star Trek: The Next Generation, who's become a very successful, well-known TV director in his own right. And I have to say, he did a great job in this episode. So the directing of this was really good. And then we have a voiceover from Spock, played by Ethan Peck at this point. But I got to say that the cadence that he gives us, it really sounds a lot like, I mean, he's not sound exactly like either Zach Quinto or Leonard Nimoy, but he has the right cadence for talking like Spock. And that was very interesting.
Well, it was the voiceover was supposed to be his personal log that we heard in the previous episode,
right?
But they redid it as a voiceover instead of as the personal log,
right? So I should probably recap just like very quickly what this episode is about. Remember that the Discovery is following these red signals that are around the galaxy that have shown up, and they end up having to spore jump to the next one because it's 30,000 light years away, and they find a pre-warp planet where there is a human colony that is too far away for them to exist there, and it looks like 19th century, 18th century Earth, and they face an ethical dilemma regarding the Prime Directive, and other issues come up regarding faith and religion, which is very interesting how they deal with it. And we'll get into all of this as we go along through the story. So we have this voiceover, this playback of the Spock's personal log, where he talks about going on a leave of absence from the Enterprise and to go search out these signals. And they have something to do with these nightmares he had as a child growing up. And so now Burnham is telling this all to Pike in his ready room. And Pike reveals that Spock's not just on leave, he's actually at a psychiatric hospital at a starbase that he checked himself into. 5. Yeah. And he checked himself in.
And that's obviously disturbing. It's meant to be disturbing, but it's going to be extra disturbing for the portion of the fan base that is not happy with Discovery to begin with.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
I'm a little surprised they made that decision because that's going to set some people off.
Yeah. Go ahead.
See, I guess I'm kind of like that, where I was okay. They put him into a psych ward instead of he's at a Vulcan retreat
meditation
house
center. Yeah.
He's at Pajem or wherever.
Yeah, where the Culinart takes place, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean there is some of that, although we did see in some of the trailers for this season, he apparently leaves the psychiatric hospital one way or the other. I guess they're developing this idea that he's somehow deeply connected to these signals in a fundamental way.
We also get another indication that Michael left things badly with Spock.
Right.
I'm personally, I'm open to what they're going to do, but I'm personally kind of apprehensive about the current trajectory of the Spock arc.
Right, especially as it relates to Burnham and whatever they're hinting at with regard to her relationship with him. I'm a little leery of that.
And not just that, but why is he so connected to why him of all people is so connected to these red bursts?
Well, and the thing is that presumably the producers want to bring Spock in to give a boost to the series with the fans.
Yeah.
Because the fans, they love Spock. We should bring him in. But if you're going to bring him in, you've got to respect what fans love about Spock, the conception of him. And you have to respect that. And I'm not saying they haven't or they won't, but like you both, I'm leery of it. They better not mess with Spock. Yeah. That's all I can say.
They're setting it up in a way that has reason for apprehension.
Yeah. And to be fair, the Spock that we will see in Discovery or should see in Discovery won't be exactly the same as he would be in the original series, because there would be 10 years of development as a person.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But there still are going to be elements that we are going to recognize in the character that go throughout the character.
Right. This is got to be the Spock who's somewhere between the cage and the where no man has gone before. That's really where we're at with this. And maybe that's what we will see, because the Spock of the cage was very different from the Spock of where no man has gone before. So maybe this is going to be offered as an explanation of how he got there.
Maybe, although I think a lot of fans treat Spock's characterization in the cage as a mopey. That's a term from comic books. I guess back in the 60s, there was an issue of The Flash where the Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen, had gotten his powers in a lab accident where lightning struck these chemicals, and he got bathed in these chemicals and he gained super speed. Well, they did a story where it turned out that accident was actually caused by an extra-dimensional imp named Mopey, who was one of the 7 heavenly helpers. And it was such an unacceptable retcon of his origin that by universal consent, that never happened, and we are never to speak of it. And so it was like removed from continuity, one of a number of things that's like that. And I think Star Trek fans tend to look at the emotional Spock of the cage as a mopey. It's just an aberration because they still had number 1, and so the emotionless thing hadn't been transferred to him yet.
Although they did deal with this in canon in the episode, the 2-part episode,
the Menagerie,
that where McCoy sees this image of the laughing Spock and brings it up, and Spock kind of addresses it. So it's not. I mean, we can kind of pretend it didn't happen, but even within the continuity, they've addressed that it did happen, and he does kind of say, I changed. I was experimenting with my humanity. I changed a lot since then. So, I mean, we could do that, but the point remains is the producers have to be very careful how they deal with Spock in this. I mean, they decided to tread on very dangerous ground. I mean, they could have picked any other characters from the original series. They could have picked Sulu or Chekhov or Uhura, but or even Scotty, but they chose one of the key characters.
Right.
Well, let's talk about less controversial stuff, like God.
Religion.
Exactly.
I thought it was very interesting that Pike says his father taught science and comparative religion. And I think this is very intentionally brought up here because this is going to be important, as we've been told. Faith is going, and we see it in this episode, issues of faith are going to play an important role through this season. So I think this was an intentional, and it does play out in this episode how Pike deals with this issue.
Well, and he said, it was a very confusing household, and it's, of course,
that's frustrating.
As we as Catholics, we would say, well, why would it be a confusing household?
Right.
Because
faith and science, are not opposed.
I mean, we have a document by, John Paul II, Pope John Paul II, called Faith and Reason, Fides et Ratio. They are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, well, this is Hollywood religion,
right?
So you're dealing with not people who are actual experts in religion writing this, and so they see more tension between science and faith than is actually there.
And that's going to be probably our biggest critique of this episode is the fact that they tried to drive that wedge,
right?
Or they portrayed that wedge, if you will, between the two of them.
They're creating an opposition that doesn't exist in reality. Although, to be fair, for some religious people, it does. For Catholics, it doesn't. For mainstream Muslims, it doesn't exist, this division. Certainly, there have been Muslim scientists who are successful. But for Catholics, I mean, Father Georges Lemaitre is called the father of the Big Bang Theory. I mean, Catholics have been scientists, and especially including astrophysicists, for a long time. Exactly. So as I said, the next red signal that they're having to deal with, so apparently this is what we're doing, is we're going from signal to signal.
These are the MacGuffins for this season.
Yes. And the next red signal is in the Beta Quadrant, 51,000 light years away, which Pike says it's something like 250 years travel at warp.
150. I thought he said 150, but yeah.
Okay, which we remember from Voyager, 75,000 light years was something like 75 years. So we're just seeing the difference in the warp scale, warp speed.
Also, faster ships in 100 years' time.
Exactly. So it's nice little that they paid a little bit of attention to that anyway. And so they need to use the spore drive to get there. And, even though Starfleet has disallowed the use of it, well, they allowed it during the war, so they'll allow it for this emergency. And I'm thinking, and the next one, and then the next one after that. One. Yeah. When it's just, we'll only use it in emergency, it ends up being, we're going to use it when we need to.
Exactly.
Well, it's like when they said in Next Gen that warp drive, turns out it damages the fabric of space-time, so you can only exceed warp 6 or whatever in emergency situations. Well, guess what? Every episode is an emergency.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So these hard limits end up what they do is they limit themselves as writers, and they regret it later.
Mm-hmm.
So Pike gets to do his first spore drive jump, and we get this line where he tells Saru, "If you're telling me that this ship can skip across the universe on a highway made of mushrooms, I kind of have to go on faith," which is funny because that really gets to the heart of my problem with the spore drive is this whole astromycology spore network thing. I just even from the first season, I just never bought this. I don't. I still don't get what they're trying to say is going that mushrooms are at the heart of what ties the universe together.
This particular type of mushroom is the connection through, through subspace or the underpinning of normal space or whatever it is what holds it all together.
It's some weird mushroom trip.
I don't know that I got that it's the mushrooms are holding all things together. I like the idea of, okay, we have panspermia in the form of these mushrooms that have, fungus-like things that have colonized our galaxy, and that they're tied into a network that we can somehow ride, and it creates a really fancy, powerful jump drive. The underlying thing here is they have a fancy jump drive that'll let them go anywhere they want, and that's fine. The rest is just brain candy for how it works.
Right.
What I don't like is the visual effect when they use it. I don't like the ship sections spinning around in that weird way. It looks stupid. I don't think you design a starship like that. It just looks weird.
Yeah.
Well, Dom, just think of it as hyperspace.
That's right. Which is anything that they want it to be.
Exactly.
Although I have to say, this line I think is a bit of the again another moment.
It's a fun line
of the producers kind of winking at us. We know. It's kind of crazy. So and then we also get the line where Saru says to Pike, "You never forget your first," which is it's just not nice. It's just why just no.
It can be taken more than one way. Not all of which are as bad as others.
Yeah, I think that's the point, though. that they want to take it more than one way.
There was another aspect to the whole issue with the mycelial network and all that, of where it was the conversation between Tilly and Stamets.
Yep.
At this point, right before the jump, where this whole where of course he saw his husband Hugh in the network, and this is where all after we die we all go there, and so the mycelial network is basically heaven, is what they're making the parallel, because life is eternal, and death goes to life, and
we're reading there. I mean, that's a possible interpretation, but they may be doing something more subtle than that with it. I'm kind of being open on what they're going to do there. Yeah. I'm just glad that they're acknowledging that there's something, that we're not just meat machines.
Right.
I mean, back in Next Gen, we have that Measure of a Man episode where Picard, just tells everybody in the briefing room that Data's a machine, but so are we, electrochemical machines, and everybody beams as if that's some marvelous insight.
Right. So what we get is they jump to this, as I said, this planet where the humans arrived on this planet 51,000 light years away before warp was invented, and are now living what looks like, from first glance, like an 18th century village or early 19th century village, the early 1800s.
Pre-electricity.
Yes, it certainly looks that way. And this is...
And that actually doesn't make sense, because if you have knowledge of how electricity works, even if you don't know the specifics,
right.
If you got a bunch of people who are from an electrical culture and you give them 200 years, they're going to rebuild the electricity pretty fast.
At minimum, you think they would figure out how to do a water mill or a windmill or something.
Yeah, within a generation, they're going to have electricity back.
Right. I mean, we do get the idea that there are people who know how the technology works. We get to that guy, especially as we go along, Jacob. But you're right. I mean, the fact that they're still living in, there doesn't seem to be anything in their religion that says that they have to remain in,
They've been trying to get the lights in the church back on.
Right.
If they had any Luddite religion thing, you're not going to be trying to turn the lights in the church back on.
Right. This is not the first time we've seen in Star Trek humans who have been removed from Earth by aliens and don't know anything about the current Federation history. We saw that in the Paradise Syndrome in the original series.
Yeah. I kind of liked the Enterprise episode where they kidnapped a bunch of people from the Old West, and then it's like they kidnapped the wrong people.
Right. There was the 37s was the when Voyager. There was one who wasn't. They weren't kidnapped by external forces. They were in suspended animation. It was the TNG episode where Picard explains that in the future there's no money.
Yeah, there's the like the uber capitalist who thought he was going to be rich beyond
yes,
Midas's dreams, and it turns out, oh, by the way, all your money is worthless because we're in the enlightened future where we don't use money anymore until you get to DS9 and we have Latinum.
Right. If only they'd woken him up 100 years earlier.
Yep. Or put him on DS9 or something. No.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's this discussion between Pike and Saru and Burnham about this colony, and they get the Pike determines that the Prime Directive or General Order 1, which is the way they refer to it throughout this episode, applies in this case. And I was kind of thinking, I'm not sure why it does. These are obviously human beings taken from Earth. They're not a separate civilization. Or even really a separate culture. They're just an offshoot.
Well, I guess his argument would be that they are a separate culture at this point, and they even have a unique religion at this point. And so one of the things, it's going to be a matter of interpretation. You'd probably need a Federation ethics panel to settle it, and he's got to make a field decision. Right. The safe field decision is assume that the Prime Directive applies. We have a mention of Luddite colonies existing even on Earth, and one of the things that the Federation is very big on is the rights of individuals to self-determination. And so if you have a group of people who have formed a culture, you need to respect their right to let that culture develop, especially if it's pre-warp. And, I'm not entirely convinced by this line of argument, but as a field decision, erring on the side of safety seems to be reasonable to me.
Since Kirk always erred in the other direction, maybe it's nice to have Pike doing that.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, it's nice to have Pike being not Kirk. And being much more thoughtful and not reckless. Also, I noted how many times he specifically said the phrase General Order Number 1 in this episode. It was a lot, and that kind of struck me because Pike himself is the reason for General Order Number 7. Which is that no Federation starship is to approach Talos 4 under any circumstances, and it carries the death penalty.
Right.
So he himself has a history with the general orders that's very personal.
That's true. That is true. We in this conversation we get a reference to there are more things in heaven and earth, the Horatio, and the end of that is than are dreamt of in your philosophy. That's a line from Hamlet. We also have a mention of Clarke's third law, meaning Arthur C. Clarke, which they say the original is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And then Pike says that this has been reimagined in the future by philosophers or whoever to say any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial intelligence is indistinguishable from God.
Yeah, not
really. This is the point where I think St. Thomas Aquinas, which, by the way, on the day we're recording this will be released. This is his feast day. I think he would have a lot to say to Captain Pike about that.
Well, let's be clear. He's not saying that it's the same as, but I think it's like Clarke was saying. The perception is that it's easy to trick people or confuse people into believing that it's God.
This is the God of signs and wonders, is what he's talking about.
Yeah,
the God who can come in and do all these great miracles and do all these great signs, and of course, it turns out it's just technology.
Right.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, it's certainly true that as an extraterrestrial intelligence advances, it would be able to fake an illusion of God better. That's true. That's not controversial. I mean, we have that here on Earth where you had the cargo cults spring up. But still knowing what God is from a Christian perspective, namely an omniperfect being, a being with all possible perfections, I can propose tests that would distinguish any advanced extraterrestrial intelligence from an omniperfect being.
So one of the thought I had was this would be like Harry Mudd trying to play God.
Right. So it's the indistinguishable part. Like, it depends on who we're talking about. For you two, or for the three of us, maybe that it doesn't apply. There might be more general audiences for whom it could perhaps apply.
Yeah.
But I get. I mean, the point still stands is that it's not universally true. This law, quote unquote, the Clarke's third.
Yeah. Now, what struck me about that, other than I want to quibble with it, is Pike seems to be. I mean, he's coming across and as open to faith in a way that Burnham is not. And she comes across as more skeptical, although she doesn't preclude it altogether, at least hasn't thus far. The rumor is that in the original version of these episodes, Pike was established as a Catholic, and that some people thought it veered too far in the direction of he's too Catholic, and they pulled it back. But what struck me about the line about any sufficiently advanced intelligence is going to be indistinguishable from God is he seemed, in delivering that line, it seemed like he's open to the idea that we're dealing with the supernatural here. And it's like, are you on some kind of religious quest? It started to make me question Pike's judgment. That he seemed too open to, and I'm not, if he said, I don't know if it's supernatural or not, that's fine. But it seems like he wanted it to be. And it made me start to question his judgment about, is he on some kind of personal vision quest here? Is that what I want in a leader who's
that's a good question, because for the season is what is Pike doing here? Why is Pike here?
Right.
We've established that so far that Starfleet has sent him on the Enterprise, and then the Enterprise was disabled, so they transferred him to Discovery. But we haven't had a third party really come in and say, that's why Pike is here. And we've only gotten Pike's version of why he's here. Maybe the Pike has some ulterior motives or underlying objective, not necessarily nefarious, but he's got other motivations as well.
It makes me wonder going forward, how far are they going to push the faith theme? Because of course Pike is presented as kind of this religious expert, because he's the only one of the crew basically who have any kind of experience in faith. I mean, you could argue Saru when you watch the little short Trek episode that he's got experience of a faith. Whether or not he agrees with is another story. But Pike is the only one who's seen as faith was an integral aspect of his life growing up. The rest of them were like, they don't really have any kind of faith life beyond that.
Well, so I thought it was interesting. It was kind of a mix. Apparently, Pike is quite open to religious stuff from the impression we're getting.
Right.
He asks Burnham and Oasekon if they've ever been in a church. And apparently neither has. Oasekon says, no, my family weren't believers. And Burnham says, well, I was raised on Vulcan, but I have a knowledge of the religious texts of Earth's major religions. So, as part of her human heritage studies, Spock and Amanda made sure she learned about Earth religions. But being on Vulcan, she didn't really have an opportunity to go to church a lot.
Right.
So they're showing us kind of a mix in society of different religious perspectives, which is good. I mean, in a human mix of religions in a human context. That's good. I think they need to give us some outright believers, though.
Yes.
And having Pike be one of those, I think, would be fine. But they give us that. And then on this planet, so to get back to the planet for a minute, the natives apparently were in World War III.
Right.
And they were under attack. They took refuge in a church, and then something transported that church all these light years away to this new planet, and they started building this colony called New Eden, and they viewed it as a kind of divine deliverance. And eventually we're going to find out it's a red angel that transported them.
Right.
But which is presumably why the red signal brought them here, because there's about to be an event that threatens their survival. But 200 years ago, they transported this church here. The people, having seen the red angel, took this as some kind of supernatural deliverance, and they wanted to thank whoever was responsible, but they didn't know who that was. And so they then,
because they all came from different religions, all the people.
They all came from different religions, and so they then decided to, since they didn't know who to thank, they decided to merge all of their religions, and so they have this syncretistic religion. That's the word that scholars use for when religions blend in some way, is syncretism. And so they have this syncretistic religion, and it's sort of Hollywood religion again.
Yeah.
Because if you look at how syncretism really occurs in the history of religions, it doesn't occur this way.
No. That's certainly not human nature.
Yeah, I mean, in polytheistic societies, you have syncretisms that occur where two cultures encounter each other and they start mapping their gods onto each other. It's like, okay, well, we call the sun god Apollo, you call the sun god Horus, so Apollo must be the same as Horus.
Right.
And that's how syncretisms tend to occur. You don't get this committed Christians, because they establish based on the stained glass in the church. You've got Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Wicca, and others.
Buddhism, Shinto.
Right. You're not going to have committed Christians and Jews saying, oh, guess what? Our God must be the same as your horned God in Wicca.
Right. That's not going to happen.
Well, and they say that, these were the religions of those who were originally brought to this planet. So you're telling me of these, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 religions. There are people from each of these, including like Shinto, which really doesn't have a presence here in the United States. Because let's go with the assumption that this was kind of a stereotypical. It looked like a stereotypical New England style white clapboard Protestant Christian church. There were Shinto believers, there were Buddhist believers, or Hindu believers, or Wicca believers.
I can only assume they grabbed this church from the vicinity of San Francisco or something, somewhere in California, where you have all of these people mixing together, including a Japanese presence for the Shinto.
And so I mean, and of course, I mean, there are the issues again, like you mentioned, Jimmy. You look at Christianity. We believe in one God. There are no other gods. We don't believe in Buddhist gods. We don't believe in Hindu gods. We don't believe in Shinto gods. We don't believe in Wicca. There's one God, and that these believers would then say, well, it must be all of them. Why wouldn't the more logical position be, we're in a Christian church and we were saved in a Christian church.
Well,
why wouldn't they all become
by beings
Christian?
that look like Christian angels, by the way.
Exactly.
Which don't exist in any of those, almost any of the, I don't think any of those religions have angelic, winged beings.
Judaism does have
besides
some
Judaism,
obviously,
right.
because that's where we got it from.
Yeah.
Well, sort of.
Sort of. Not to the development that we have it in Christianity.
It's certainly compatible. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But yes.
So I suspect what would happen in real life in a situation like this is one of two things. I mean, I think the fact an angel appeared would give people a reason to interpret this in a religious way. I think people would make the argument that Father Corey has just made. This happened in a church with an angel. Let's thank the Christian God.
Right.
Even if you have a bunch of other people here, the scenarios that would probably develop would be, let's all thank our own understanding of who God is. You would have people who might say, well, I'm a Wiccan, I'm not going to thank the Christian God, but I'll thank mine.
Right.
And that could be, understand them doing that. Also, I think you could have a pitch for, look, even people who are pagans, like Shinto believers, you presumably acknowledge or might be willing to acknowledge that there's one great God behind everything, even if you think there are subsidiary gods or beings that we as Christians might call angels. So let's thank the one who's in charge of everything. Right. And leave it to him exactly what subsidiary agents he used in this.
Right.
The
idea, yeah. So the basic, two things would happen. Either they would all go and thank their God in their way, or they would kill each other over whose God reigns supreme.
Yeah,
because that's pretty much human history.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the idea that they would take their holy books and that they have all the holy books of all these different religions and cut and paste proof texts from each of these into all new scriptures. Okay, and counting their little journal of what happened since.
Well, let's back up a second. Where did all these books come from? Like what? Again, you're in a Christian church, so presumably the Bibles would be there. But the Torah, the Quran, where would these have come from?
Well, the Torah would have been there because that's the first 5 books of the Bible.
I suppose, although not in Hebrew necessarily.
True.
I might not have seen it actually, a cut up. Not that Jews would ever allow the Torah to be cut up either. That would be a whole nother. But it's just it pushes the boundaries of belief if you push too hard on any of this, and that's the problem. For believers, it's hard to believe. So to speak.
Having said that, it's kind of a sci-fi premise, and as a Twilight Zone thing, even though this wouldn't happen in real life, I can say, okay, well, this wouldn't happen in real life, but for purposes of story, let's take this weird Twilight Zone-y understanding and see what happens.
And that's what I was willing to do.
And they tried to even explain that about how, well, they had that whole exposition, which frankly was completely unnecessary and only existed to try to justify the syncretic religion, in my opinion. We were brought here by this miracle. And because of that, we didn't know who to thank. So what did we do? Oh, we thanked all the gods. They actually even had that question and answer, like a catechism class.
Right. Yeah. Now I got to say, Pike's reaction to some of this was, again, interesting. So, Pike had a very excellent answer about the stained glass. Stained glass windows are there to teach the gospel to those who could read. Right.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true.
That's right on target. That's a good answer.
That was good.
Someone found the right Wikipedia entry for that.
I also liked Pike's reaction when the woman religious leader, I don't remember her name, but kind of the priestess lady, says "Peace be with you" to him, which is a that's a biblical line. I mean, that's part of St. Paul's standard greeting.
Yeah,
and he and now in Catholic liturgy, it would be "The Lord be with you."
Right.
Yep. Unless it's a bishop.
Okay.
Bishop says "Peace be with you."
Okay. Well. But they're not, since they're syncretists, they're not just going to say the Lord unless they've reinterpreted what that means, because it would mean Jesus, or Yahweh. But Pike then gives the liturgically correct response, and also with you, except Hollywood religion again. The classic response in the liturgy, which is in the Latin and has been used in English, except in a very narrow time window, is "and with your spirit." But due to a loosey-goosey translation philosophy that got implemented in the 1970s, we had to deal with a couple of decades of "and also with you" as a loosey-goosey translation of "and with your spirit." And then they retightened it up and said, "Nah, let's say what it actually says in Latin." And so this is the more familiar version to the Hollywood Catholics who are writing this script. Is like they've been in church a number of years ago, maybe when they were kids, and they remember "and also with you" being the response.
And to be fair, Catholics every once in a while will slip up on that, because we did say "and also with you" for about 40 years, and we've only been saying "and with your spirit" again for about less than 10. So
there's this interesting.
By the way, I like the name of their planet, Terralysium. Yeah. So that's a fusion of Terra, which means earth, and Elysium, which was Greek heaven.
Yes. So
I was trying to figure that out. I figured you'd have that.
Heavenly earth.
It's better than another Terra Nova.
Yeah, there is by the way, there's some of the scripture from this cobbled together holy book. For those who live the old way burn, those who sin against us shall be cut down by our gods. That doesn't sound like any scripture that I'm aware of. So this must be some original writing.
They made stuff up too.
Yeah. Yep. I did find it interesting that Pike observes the norms of this religion when they are in this welcoming ritual, this ceremony that he takes part.
Yeah, and I found it interesting. I mean, that's what you would do if you're trying to fit in and pass yourselves off as people from some nearby colony. But assuming the nearby colony didn't become a colony because you had a religious schism with these people. But then Burnham is just really pushing the limits in that scene of, well, has anybody proposed science as their religion? And what about this and that? And if I was Pike, I'd be going, tone it down.
I would have been nudging her with my elbow. Easy there. Take it back.
I did like how the Terralysians have like this technology that was there when they came, but they don't know how to use it anymore, and they've preserved little scraps of knowledge. And for anybody who has read A Canticle for Leibowitz, that's exactly what the memorabilia in A Canticle for Leibowitz is. It's little things from the pre-nuclear devastation that the Leibowitzian monks have preserved little scraps of knowledge so that they know an electron is a negative twist of nothing, but they don't quite know what that means.
Right.
And so we have kind of the same situation here.
By the way, there's a whole subplot concerning Tilly. I do want to get to that. It's interspersed, but I don't want to jump back and forth. So we'll come back to the Tilly subplot after we talk about the main plot here. We do have. I mean, we do have to say that the point that the reason the red signal brought them here was, as you mentioned, Jimmy, the planet's got rings, and the outer rings are about to collapse and cause an extinction level event. Within, I don't know, 60 minutes, we're counting down. At 3 seconds, we can still save everyone. That's the standard Star Trek trope. So that's the ticking time bomb that we have to deal with here. So meanwhile, there's this fellow Jacob, who apparently he's the whiz with technology. He's descended from, of course, the original settlers who are taking care of the technology. He's been keeping things running until recently. Well, he figures out that the Discovery crew is from Earth, and he disables them, takes their stuff, and he's got a
flashbang grenade he uses.
Yes, and he's determined to prove that science saved these people, not God, which is an interesting little twist in the plot. So he's apparently a secret unbeliever in this community.
I don't know that I got that. I just got that he believed that Earth survived and would eventually come get him, and that's what he wants.
Okay. That doesn't necessarily say he's a non-believer, but he doesn't necessarily believe that it was miraculous means that brought them there, that it could in fact have been technological means, because he does kind of bring that up, doesn't he? Like that. I did write that. Like he's determined to prove that science was what brought them where they were. I'm trying to find that in the text. I got
that, but I thought he was just focused on Earth isn't dead.
Okay, all right, maybe Let's see.
You may be right. I may have missed it.
Yep. Yeah, he says, my ancestors were right, weren't they? The Earth wasn't destroyed. Mankind evolved. And then he says the radio has always been my family. And he knew they were coming when the red burst appeared in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess he doesn't actually. Yeah, he doesn't actually say science, not God. So it's interesting. I like that Owessa Khan, after they awaken and they've been locked in the cellar, she figures out how to get them out, because she's like, if it's a slide bolt, I'm just going to use a magnet to slide the bolt out.
Yeah,
and of course there's a workbench full of old electrical devices, so there's magnets. So she's the one who grew up in the Luddite Collective, which I think I thought was a very interesting little data point, that there are Luddite collectives. Luddites are people who reject technology, insist on living
kind of like our modern Amish.
Yeah. I was going to say they although there's a variety of adherences to the no technology rule, but among the Amish, but yeah, in general, people who reject technology. So
I thought that was a great little scene, and I also like that we're now starting to get to meet the rest of the bridge crew,
right,
and learn about them. And so this was like her focus episode.
That is one thing in general I do like about this season so far. Of course, 2 episodes in, is it's not the Michael Burnham show as bad.
Yes. So, and then we have to up the drama a little bit. After they've escaped, they go confront Amisha and Jacob, and they're talking about, no, I don't know what Jacob's talking about. This is just normal stuff. And I inherited from my ancestors. They're trying to talk about their devices. And they turn around and they see a little girl playing with a phaser. Which is
putting it on overload,
which is exactly the worst case scenario of the person unknowingly playing with a weapon, and Pike dives on it, which is interesting, to save her, and it goes off, doesn't blast him into smithereens or dissolve him, disintegrate him, but it does put a nice little hole in his belly.
And he will die if they don't get him serious medical attention fast.
Exactly. Burnham refuses to use their technology to save his life, obeying the General Order No. 1 and Pike's orders. Yep. But she says, let's take him to the church to pray for a deliverance. And I think what she's doing
is nice to see her working with the situation she's in.
And she's apparently trying to get to there so that they can be transported out of that's where they beamed in,
sight unseen. Yep.
And that's where they can be beamed out. Meanwhile, Discovery's working the problem of the stuff that fell. We'll come back to this
ring collapse.
Yeah, the ring collapsing. We'll come back to how this all comes about, but they use the dark matter asteroid and its intense gravitational pull to pull a donut with the Discovery and slingshot it all out of the orbit.
I have to admit that kind of felt like a role-playing game device. You play a role-playing game like the Final Fantasy series or something like that, and you get this magic object that couple of minutes later you have to use this magic object to solve the next puzzle.
Yeah, that goes all the way back to Zork, I think. Pick up hammer. Use hammer. Yeah. So the team transports away, the away team transports away in front of the people from the planet, and you're like, the jig's up.
Yeah.
But the Amisha,
lady immediately interprets it as the gods have delivered them. So,
well, if there's any sufficiently advanced technology, right? So let's go back to the Tilly subplot, which is she's been working this dark matter asteroid, which has been displaying some unusual properties.
Right. And she initially harvests a sample of it to try to use to build an interface for the mycelial network. And there's an accident, and she ends up getting blown across the room by an energy discharge in the cargo bay. And yes, for once, we have the computer notice an unauthorized energy discharge and tell people about it. So
exactly.
Can't just fire a phaser in a ship and not have that go unnoticed.
Exactly.
So I was really happy about that. She then wakes up in sickbay with Dr. Pollard, and I'm really starting to like Dr. Pollard. She had like one line in the previous episode, and that was fun. But now she has several lines, and they're fun too.
Oh yeah.
I have to say that this scene in sickbay with Saru, like it talks to her about, you're putting too much pressure on yourself on the command program. He shows both empathy and exceptional leadership here.
Yeah, I like he walks in and he basically chews her rear end for what she was doing. I mean, he's all but yelling at her. What do you think you were doing?
But then he mitigates it a little bit and gives her like positive, builds her up and gives her some leadership advice. And I thought this was so good. I thought that scene, it raised Saru in my estimation as a character, but it also raised this series as, okay, this is, they know what they're talking about when it comes to this sort of stuff. That this sounds right. This was good.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good.
They're definitely developing Saru as a character, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I suspect he may be the next permanent captain. We'll have to see.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
But I like how he says, as the only Kelpian in Starfleet, he really put a lot of pressure on himself, and he learned 90 Federation languages. And Tilly's response to that is fluently. And as anyone who's tried to learn another sign and knows how hard it is to become fluent, that's exactly the right thing to say. And he dodges the question, but implicitly admits he doesn't know them fluently.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we kind of went by a little bit. So Tilly is trying to develop a new interface for the spore drive so that Stamets doesn't have to be the one to go into it, because Stamets is afraid that if he encounters Hugh or whatever looks to be like Hugh in this network again, he may not come out. And so she's trying to save him. And Tilly, as we've come to learn, is all about saving everybody. She needs to save people.
But she needs some help from someone, and so her imaginary friend May starts showing up and creepily says things to her after Tilly says, "You read my mind," and she says, "Your mind is so much fun." So okay, what's going on here? They
don't make it obvious at the beginning that May is an imaginary friend. We just think she's another crewman.
I spotted it the first time.
So I did too. So maybe it was as it was obvious to others, but they didn't come right out and say it. She didn't disappear. People walked in the room and she didn't say anything, but they didn't acknowledge her. But that doesn't necessarily mean.
But then she's not in the reverse camera angle shot.
Right. So did she walk out? Was there a mistake in blocking? That sort of thing in continuity.
Yeah, I mean, at first, when she first appears, like, okay, who is this random person we have never seen before?
Right.
And then, of course, it becomes clear who she is. But
right. And so Tilly gets this when she finds out about the collapsing ring, planetary ring. She's the one who comes up with the idea of using the massive gravitational pull of the asteroid to pull all the radioactive debris away from the planet by doing a donut maneuver. Which I love that the helmsman is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that.
The scene where they solve that on the bridge, where Tilly comes running up to the bridge and explains the idea, and then the navigator or the helmswoman starts working on it, and Saru says, "Is this possible?" And she says, "Oh yeah, except no." And then she points out another problem, and then Stamets solves that, and then Saru endorses Stamets' plan, and it's nice team problem solving, and it was a lot of fun.
Right.
Well, I like that too, because Stamets is sitting there talking about, well, we can do it this. That sounds great. Run.
Yeah, run, Mr. Stamets.
So, and this actress who plays the helmswoman, she's obviously being given more openness to her character as well.
Right.
Again, we talked about this last episode, but they're obviously developing these characters more because her facial expressions where she's like, I don't know. Oh, wait. And then she gets this big grin on her face. I can do this. You know,
this is Detmer, Lieutenant Detmer.
Detmer. Yeah.
I mean, basically all we got from her in the first season was her anger at Burnham. That was pretty much defined
she
her.
was on the Shenzhou.
Right.
And when everything happened, and she was injured, that's why she's got the implant along the side of her head and her fake eye.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to watch for that.
And but so it's nice that she's getting more. She's her character's growing, which is great. And so after they've solved this problem, they've saved the planet.
By the way, so we have yet another super dense rock field on screen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And also the dark matter asteroid, while it, to let us know it's the dark matter asteroid, they have it glow blue. Real dark matter does not glow. That's why it's called dark. Because it's invisible.
Right. So the as Tilly is heading back to sickbay because she's still in her sickbay gown right as she's on the bridge. As she's heading back to sickbay, she gets on the turbolift and this character May appears and says, "Way to go, Stilly." And that throws Tilly for a loop, and she's like, "Wait a minute." And then as she gets back to her quarters, she looks her up. This was
Stilly apparently was her high school nickname.
Right.
Junior high nickname.
Yep.
Right. And this girl, May, was her classmate. And so Tilly's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe May is on board. This person I knew." And looks up. She's not on board. She looks her up in the Federation database because you can look up anybody. It's like the best Google ever, or scariest, depending on how you view it. And it determines that, May died years ago. So who is this? Who is May? Is she a product of Tilly's concussion? Is she something out of the mycelial network? And
is she an alien pretending to be a friend?
Right. And is this related to Hugh's appearances to Stamets, both last season and this season?
I will be really disappointed if they go with alien pretending to be a friend. Right. And I think they can't just give us a concussion either. I think what they are going to do in this season, and what they need to do, given the subjects they're exploring, is they need to end with something that is ambiguously open to faith, like what they did on Deep Space Nine. Right. Because it's Star Trek series, they're not going to come out and say, "Yeah, religion is all real, and here's the right one." Right. They're not going to do that. But they need to also not just debunk either. And the vibe I'm getting from this season, like with Deep Space Nine, is that that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to give us something that's thoughtful and open, but non-definitive.
I have a very bad feeling that when Spock is out there going to discover God among the red angels, his other half-brother Sybok is going to show.
That would really not entertain the fans.
That would be very bad. Well, yeah, why does God need a starship?
Didn't I ever mention my other brother, Captain Pike? In addition to Spock, there's Sybok. We were like three of us, growing up together.
We were inseparable.
We didn't talk about him, yeah.
Oh, gosh, please don't.
Sybok is another Mopey.
Yes, he is. In fact, the autobiography of James T. Kirk, that book, does a very good job of taking Sybok and putting him off in a little corner forever. Which is,
yeah.
But the thing is, with this character, what I'm guessing is going to happen is they're going to. This is my theory. We can tell if we'll come back and prove them right or wrong. She's also going to be somehow connected to the mycelial network. The dead are showing up in the network somehow. Some version of them, something about them, not quite sure. And this is going to be part of the reason why they cannot use the jump drive in the future. That there'll be something that ultimately says we've got to close off this accessing of the mycelial network, and maybe even the mycelial network will go away altogether.
Well, we've got again kind of this idea that after Hugh died, that his consciousness, if nothing else, transferred into the mycelial network. And I wonder if that's kind of where they're going, is when certain people, or who knows what, or all of humanity, or who knows, that when they die, that's where you end up afterwards. And that's where I made the comment earlier about how they're trying to almost make that connection between the mycelial network and what we understand heaven to be.
Right. That would be disappointing if they make that direct of a connection.
Yeah.
So
at the end of this episode, we have Pike go back down to the planet, and he gets one thing we haven't mentioned, the Terralesians have a helmet cam from a soldier. It's broken, but it records the event of how they got there. And so Pike goes back down and tells Jacob that, yes, he was right. We are from Earth, and we're part of a Federation now. And he's kind of breaking General Order Number 1, and he and Burnham have a discussion about that before he does it. And then he gives Jacob shuts down the transmitter that his family's been using to try to attract an Earthship.
Right.
Because now they've responded, and he says, that's enough for me. He doesn't say, take me with you. And that's good because he's mentioned a family.
Right.
And if you've got a family, you don't necessarily want to unplug from that.
Which is what Saru did.
And he actually said he was satisfied to hear that Earth did survive, that there were people out there. And that's all he wanted.
Right.
But to know that there were people out there. Yeah.
And as I was going to say, this is what Saru did, is he did go. This is a mirror of Saru's encounter with Philippa Georgiou and going with her, where this guy doesn't go.
They've both got transmitters to bring in a Federation ship, and that's what happens. Yeah. Pike then gives him a power cell in exchange for the helmet. And he uses it to finally turn on the lights of the church, and it's this wondrous moment for the Terralesians. And I'm going, I think that's a step too far. How in terms of General Order Number 1? How about, can I borrow that helmet cam for just a minute and download the data? You know,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how is Jacob going to explain this power cell? Oh, I just found it here under the bench after 200 years.
Yeah. Then the out scene for the episode is Pike is alone. Instead of having people forensically examining this data module on the helmet, and instead of having people watch it with him to analyze it, he's just watching it alone. And he sees the inside of the church being attacked in World War III. And then a Red Angel comes in and it all goes blank.
Well, they just uploaded it to Discovery's Plex server, and he could watch it on his own time.
Well, I think it might play into that, what you mentioned, Jimmy, which is that Pike's on some kind of personal mission.
Yeah. Because normally you'd bring in all your experts and say, let's figure this thing out together.
Yeah, you hand it over.
You may notice something. Yeah,
you hand it over to Burnham and say,
it doesn't necessarily say they didn't do that, but that he was
right.
The idea that he was sitting there watching it in his ready room privately.
Yeah,
you know, says there's something more there than just personal curiosity.
So before this, this happened, there was that moment where in the ready room where Burnham and Pike have a conversation. Pike is recovering from being blasted, and he's still sore, his ribs are sore, and he says as Burnham comes, he says, "Don't make me laugh." And she says, "Fortunately for you, I was raised on Vulcan. We don't do funny," which makes him laugh, which makes all of us laugh.
It was kind of a cute line.
That was nice. I thought that was funny.
Maybe I should just be quiet.
Yes. But she argues that to serve the overriding mission of finding out about the signals, that the Prime Directive, or General Order Number 1, might have to be sacrificed. And Pike rejects that to a degree, although he does violate it, as we just discussed. But then it raises the question: is why is this mission so very important? Why is this so important that we have to violate General? It's interesting. There are these signals. It's a conundrum, but it doesn't seem to be threatening, as far as we know. They've done nothing to hurt anything, destroy anything. So, they have not yet established, why is it so important that they find out about what the source of these signals, that we've got to upend everything?
In the first episode, when Pike first showed up, he said Federation citizens are at threat by these things.
Right.
But I don't recall them establishing how.
Exactly. The only thing that's happened so far is...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought they were kind of hinting like, you know, the Federation is kind of squeamish after the war, and the war started with that initial signal, and is this something more along that lines? But I think that's really as far as they got, as any kind of hint towards it.
Yeah. That's something they need to do something about. So any last notes that either of you have on this episode?
Just a couple of small things. They've established that Federation standard is English.
Yeah, that's true.
They mentioned that. The one line about, you know, where Burnham says that was before warp was invented. She grew up in Vulcan and didn't say that was before humans invented warp, because Vulcans already had warp at that point. That's how you had first contact. And then just kind of a comment on my own. You know, Tilly is the youngest member accepted in the command program. Please don't make her another Wesley Crusher.
Until Kirk, right?
Yeah.
And that's the last thing I want to say about it is I'm curious whether the producers will be able to resist the temptation to show us a young Kirk. They've showed us Spock. Are we going to start trotting out all of the old crew little by little in cameos or other ways?
Kirk would have been what, about 20 at this point?
He'd be a cadet. He'd be at Tilly's age. He's probably a contemporary of Tilly's.
Is he? I thought he'd be an officer by this point, but obviously not a captain.
Well, 10 years to become captain. He was the youngest captain. He was 34 when he became captain. So he'd be an ensign or first lieutenant.
Yeah,
or ensign or lieutenant,
and he wouldn't be assigned to the Enterprise. But I wouldn't mind if they show us a young Kirk in another season. I mean, he doesn't belong in this season.
No. It should be interesting to see if we get a load of him. All right.
Actually, it'd be kind of fun if they do it kind of as a pass through, where he just happened to meet him. What was his name? Oh, Kirk.
Jimmy.
And just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And just that's
hey,
it.
Jimmy Kirk.
Yeah, something like that.
So I do want to get to some feedback. We guys got a couple of bits of feedback on last week's episode on Brother. Joan Lopez commenting on YouTube says reminds us Spock's fiance was T'Pring, not T'Pau.
Oh yeah, right. Yep.
So thank you for that correction, Joan. And Edward Klein on Facebook says I enjoyed the discussion about the season 2 opener last week's episode. I think y'all missed I'm quoting directly. I think y'all missed a possibility for the not every loss eternal from the fortune cookie, which he might be the Enterprise, which Pike has now lost at least temporarily. So that's a possibility. Yep. So thank you for the feedback, and we always love to get feedback from listeners. And before we wrap things up, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek. And today we want to especially thank by name a handful: Kelly B, Max S, Rochelle K, Familia Napuri, and Trevor W. Through their generous donations and all the donations from all of our patrons at sqpn.com/give, they make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at sqpn.com, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What do you think of this episode, New Eden, and our discussion of it? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/trek or the SQPN Facebook page and leave us some feedback on the episode there, or send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. You can find relevant links in our discussion in our show notes at sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode, which is, we actually have learned...
Point of Light.
Point of Light. They've been keeping the episode titles for the season under their hat, although the Canadians have let it out of the bag.
Those darn Canadians.
The Space Channel airs Discovery in Canada, and they actually released a list of at least the next handful of episodes. So Point of Light, the Mirror Universe Philippa Georgiou is back, which will be interesting. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, be bold, be brave, be courageous. Black Alert.
Black Alert. Black Alert.